Sarah McAllister dropped to her knees in the middle of the dirt road. 3 children clung to her dress. The youngest one cried. She had no money, no food, no place to sleep tonight. Every door in Cedar Hollow had slammed in her face. Every man had looked away. Every woman had whispered behind her back. She pressed her forehead to the dust and whispered, "God, if you're listening, send me someone who sees more than my shame." A wagon stopped. A man's voice cut through the silence. "Ma'am, what can you do?" Subscribe now and follow Sarah's journey to the very end. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The summer of 1875 had burned everything it touched. Sarah McAllister stood at the edge of Cedar Hollow with dust on her boots and despair in her chest. 3 children pressed against her legs. The youngest, a girl named Emma, had stopped crying 2 days ago. She was too tired to cry now. The stagecoach had left them here. The driver said this was as far as their tickets went. He didn't look at Sarah when he said it. He didn't look at the children either. Sarah watched the coach disappear down the road, trailing a cloud of yellow dust that hung in the air like a curse. "Mama," her oldest boy said. His name was Thomas. He was 8 years old and had his father's jaw. "Where do we go now?" Sarah didn't answer. She picked up her suitcase with one hand and lifted Emma onto her hip with the other. "We walk," she said. Cedar Hollow wasn't much of a town. A general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple, a feed shop, a blacksmith, a boarding house with a sign that read, "Rooms available," in faded red letters. Sarah walked toward the boarding house first. Her feet ached, her arms burned, but she kept her back straight and her chin high. A woman stood on the porch, sweeping dust that would return within the hour. She had gray hair pulled back tight and eyes that measured people like livestock. "Ma'am," Sarah said, "I'm looking for a room, just for tonight. I can pay." The woman stopped sweeping. She looked at Sarah, then at the children, then at Sarah's left hand, where no ring sat. "Where's your husband?" Sarah's throat tightened. "Dead. Cholera took him on the trail 3 months ago." The woman's mouth pressed into a thin line. "I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't rent to women traveling alone." "I'm not alone. I have my children." "That's worse." The woman started sweeping again. "Folks talk. I can't have talk." Sarah felt Thomas tug at her sleeve. She ignored it. "Please, just one night. The children haven't eaten since yesterday." The woman didn't look up. "Try the church. They help people like you." People like you. Sarah had heard those words before. In Kansas, in Missouri, in every town between here and the life she'd left behind. She turned away without another word. The church was small and white, and sat at the end of the main street like an afterthought. A preacher stood near the door, talking to a man in a black coat. They both stopped when Sarah approached. "Reverend," she said, "I was told you might help travelers in need." The preacher smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He was younger than she expected. Soft hands, clean boots. Of course. The Lord provides for all His children." He glanced at her children, counted them silently. "Are you passing through?" "I'm looking for work, and a place to stay until I find it." The preacher exchanged a look with the man in the black coat. "Work," the preacher repeated. "What kind of work?" "Any kind. I can cook, clean, sew. I can read and write. I can do figures." The man in the black coat laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. "A woman who can do figures," he said. "That's a new one." Sarah held his gaze. "I kept my husband's books for 6 years. I never made a mistake." The man stopped laughing. The preacher cleared his throat. "Mrs. McAllister, Sarah McAllister. Mrs. McAllister, I'm afraid we don't have any positions available, and our charity fund is quite limited this month. Perhaps if you moved on to the next town." "The next town is 40 miles away." "Then perhaps you should have planned your journey more carefully." Sarah stared at him. The words hit her like a slap. Thomas stepped forward, his small hands balled into fists. "Don't talk to my mama like that," he said. Sarah put her hand on his shoulder. "Thomas, hush." "But Mama," I said, "hush." The preacher smiled again, that same empty smile. "Spirited boy, I hope you can teach him some manners before he gets much older." He tipped his hat. "Good day, Mrs. McAllister. I'll pray for your safe travels." He walked back into the church. The man in the black coat followed. The door closed. Sarah stood there for a long moment. Emma squirmed on her hip. Her second boy, Daniel, who was 6 and hadn't spoken since his father died, pressed his face against her skirt. "Mama," Thomas said quietly, "what do we do now?" Sarah looked down the empty street. The sun was starting to sink. In a few hours, it would be dark. In a few hours, they would have nowhere to go. "We keep trying," she said. The general store was her next stop. A bell jingled when she pushed open the door. The smell of flour and tobacco filled her nose. A man stood behind the counter. Thick arms, thick mustache. He was cutting rope with a knife that looked too sharp for the job. "Help you?" he said, without looking up. "I'm looking for work. Any kind of work." He looked up then. His eyes moved from her face to her children, to her worn dress, to her dusty boots. "Ain't hiring." "I didn't ask if you were hiring. I said I'm looking for work. I'll sweep your floors, stock your shelves, clean your windows. I'll do it for food. You don't even have to pay me money." The man set down his knife. "Lady, I don't know where you came from, but we don't do charity here. This is a business." "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a chance." He shook his head. "Can't help you. Try somewhere else." "I've tried everywhere else." "Then I guess you're out of luck." Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, not yet, but crack. "Please," she said. The word came out smaller than she intended. "My children are hungry." The man looked at her children. For a moment, something softened in his face. Then it hardened again. "Ain't my problem," he said. "Door's behind you." She tried the saloon next. The bartender laughed in her face. She tried the blacksmith. He told her women didn't belong in his shop. She tried a woman selling eggs from a cart. The woman crossed herself and walked away like Sarah carried disease. By the time the sun touched the horizon, Sarah had knocked on every door in Cedar Hollow. Every single one had closed in her face. She found a spot behind the feed store, where a pile of old crates provided some shelter from the wind. She sat down on the hard ground and gathered her children close. "Are we sleeping here, Mama?" Thomas asked. "Just for tonight." "I'm hungry." "I know, baby, I know." Emma started crying again. Small, weak sounds that broke Sarah's heart. Daniel still hadn't spoken. He just stared at nothing with eyes too old for a 6-year-old. Sarah reached into her suitcase and pulled out the last thing she had. A small piece of bread, hard as stone, that she'd been saving for 3 days. She broke it into 3 pieces and gave one to each child. "Eat slow," she said. "Make it last." Thomas looked at her piece. "Mama, where's yours?" "I already ate. Earlier. You didn't see." He knew she was lying. She could see it in his eyes. But he didn't argue. He just ate his bread slowly, like she told him. Sarah leaned her head back against the crates and closed her eyes. This was it. This was rock bottom. She had nothing left. No money, no food, no hope. She had walked 1,000 miles to escape her husband's debts and his brother's cruelty. She had buried the only man she ever loved in a shallow grave beside a river whose name she'd already forgotten. She had carried 3 children across mountains and deserts and plains, promising them that something better waited at the end. And now, here she was, behind a feed store, in a town that didn't want her. She had failed them. She had failed her children. A single tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away before anyone could see. "God," she whispered, "if you're listening, if you ever listened, please send someone, anyone. Send someone who sees more than my shame." The wagon came at dusk. Sarah heard it before she saw it. The creak of wheels, the clop of hooves, the jingle of harness. She didn't move, didn't look up. Probably just another person who would look through her like she was made of glass. The wagon stopped. Boots hit the dirt. Footsteps approached. "Ma'am?" The voice was deep, rough around the edges, but not unkind. Sarah looked up. A man stood there, tall, broad shoulders, a face that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the mountains. He wore a dusty hat and a coat that had seen better years. A scar ran along his jaw, white against sun-darkened skin. He looked at her, then at the children, then back at her. "You all right?" he asked. Sarah almost laughed. Almost. "Do I look all right?" He didn't smile, didn't flinch, just studied her with eyes the color of storm clouds. "No, ma'am," he said. "You don't." He crouched down so he was at her level. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the way his hands were rough and scarred from years of work. "Name's Jacob Thornton," he said. "Folks call me Jake. I got a ranch about 10 miles west of here. Came into town for supplies." He paused. "Saw you earlier. Watched you go door to door. Watched every single one slam in your face." Sarah's jaw tightened. "You watched?" "I did." "And you didn't help?" "Wanted to see what you'd do first." "What I'd do?" He nodded. "Some folks give up after the first no. Some after the 5th. You went to every door in this town, every single one. And when they all said no, you found a spot behind this store and you fed your children before yourself." He paused. "That tells me something." Sarah stared at him. "What does it tell you?" "Tells me you're not the kind to quit. Tells me you've got grit. Tells me you'd die before you let those children suffer." Sarah said nothing. Her throat was too tight. Jake stood up. He extended his hand. "I got a ranch that needs work. More work than one man can handle. Lost my wife 3 years ago. Lost my daughter, too. Been running the place alone ever since." He paused. "I ain't offering charity. I'm offering a job. Room and board for you and the little ones. Fair wage for fair work." Sarah looked at his hand, looked at his face. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me? You don't know anything about me." Jake's eyes held hers. "I know you walked into this town with 3 children and nothing else. I know every person here turned you away. I know you're sitting in the dirt behind a feed store with no food and no money and no hope." He paused. "And I know that tomorrow you'll get up and try again anyway, because that's who you are." Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes. She fought them down. "You don't know what I've done," she said quietly. "You don't know where I came from." "Don't care." "I have debts, people looking for me. My husband's brother Don't care about that either. Sarah shook her head. You're either a fool or a saint, Mr. Thornton. Ain't either. Just a rancher who needs help. He kept his hand extended. So, what can you do? There it was, the question. Not where did you come from? Not what happened to your husband? Not why is everyone afraid of you? Just what can you do? Sarah took a breath, then another. I can cook, she said. I can clean. I can sew and mend and wash. I can keep books and do figures. I can read and write. I can work from sunrise to sunset without complaint. She paused, lifted her chin. I can hold 3 children in my arms and still chop firewood. I can bury a husband in the morning and walk 10 miles before nightfall. I can be turned away by an entire town and still get up the next day. Jake nodded slowly. That'll do, he said. He reached down and took her hand. His grip was strong and warm. He pulled her to her feet. Thomas jumped up, eyes wide. Mama, are we going with him? Sarah looked at Jake, really looked at him, searching for the lie, the trap, the cruelty hiding behind kindness. She found nothing but steady eyes and calloused hands. Yes, she said quietly. We're going with him. The wagon ride took 2 hours. The children fell asleep within the first mile, curled together on the blankets Jake had spread in the back. Sarah sat beside him on the driver's bench, watching the land roll past. Neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came when 2 people had nothing to prove and nothing to hide. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and red, Sarah broke it. Why were you watching me? She asked. Earlier, in town. Jake didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on the road. My wife asked me the same question once, the day I met her. She was standing outside a church in San Antonio with a suitcase in her hand and nowhere to go. He paused. I watched her for an hour before I worked up the courage to talk to her. What happened? I married her. We had a daughter. We built a life. His jaw tightened. Then the fever came and took them both in the same week. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, she said. So am I. They rode in silence again. The ranch came into view as the last light faded. A main house, a barn, a bunkhouse, a corral with horses moving like shadows. It wasn't grand, but it was solid, real. Jake stopped the wagon near the main house and climbed down. Bunkhouse is around back, he said. It's small, but it's clean. Stove works, beds are good. You and the children can stay there. He started unloading supplies from the wagon. There's food in the pantry. Help yourself. We'll talk about work in the morning. Sarah climbed down slowly. Her legs shook. Mr. Thornton. He looked at her. Thank you, she said. I don't know how to. Don't thank me yet, he said. Work starts at dawn. You might hate me by noon. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he tipped his hat and walked toward the barn. Sarah gathered her sleeping children and carried them one by one to the bunkhouse. It was small, like he said. 2 rooms, a stove, 3 beds with clean sheets. She tucked the children in, kissed their foreheads, watched their chests rise and fall. Then she sat by the window and looked out at the darkening land. For the first time in 3 months, she wasn't afraid someone would take her children while she slept. For the first time in 3 months, she had a roof over her head. For the first time in 3 months, someone had looked at her and seen a person instead of a problem. She didn't cry, not yet, but something shifted in her chest. Something that had been wound tight for so long began to loosen. One question, That's all it had taken. "What can you do?" She had answered with the truth, and the truth had been enough. Tomorrow, the work would begin. Tomorrow, she would prove herself. Tomorrow, she would start building something from nothing. But tonight, she let herself rest. Tonight, she let herself hope. Outside, the stars came out one by one. The wind moved through the grass like a whisper. The horses settled in their stalls, and somewhere in the darkness, Jake Thornton stood alone, staring at the bunkhouse light, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or the best decision he'd made in 3 years. Only time would tell. Sarah woke before the sun. Her body ached from sleeping on an unfamiliar bed. Her hands trembled as she pulled on her boots, but she moved quietly, careful not to wake the children. She had one chance to prove she belonged here. One chance to show Jake Thornton that he hadn't made a mistake. She stepped outside into the gray morning light and nearly collided with a woman standing on the porch. The woman was older, maybe 60. Dark skin weathered by decades of sun. Sharp eyes that missed nothing. She held a basket of eggs against her hip. "You're the one," the woman said. Not a question. Sarah straightened her spine. "I'm Sarah McAllister. I know who you are. Jake told me last night." The woman looked her up and down slowly. "I'm Rosa. I've been cooking for this ranch since before Jake's daddy died. Since before Jake was born, matter of fact. I didn't know there was anyone else here. There's a lot you don't know." Rosa thrust the basket toward her. "Take these. Kitchen's in the main house. Coffee's already on. Jake takes his black. Strong. Don't burn it." Sarah took the basket. "Yes, ma'am." Rosa turned to go, then stopped. "One more thing." "Yes?" "Don't fall in love with him." Sarah blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Every woman who comes through here gets the same fool idea. Jake Thornton's a good man, a kind man. But he buried his heart with his wife and daughter. It ain't coming back." Rosa's eyes softened just slightly. "Save yourself the trouble. Just do your work and keep your distance." She walked away before Sarah could respond. Sarah stood there for a long moment, holding the eggs, wondering what kind of place she'd stumbled into. Then she went to make coffee. The kitchen was larger than she expected. Clean, but cluttered. Pots hung from hooks on the ceiling. A massive iron stove dominated one wall. Everything smelled like smoke and old grease. She found the coffee, ground it fresh, put the pot on the stove. She was cracking eggs into a bowl when Jake walked in. He stopped in the doorway. Surprise flickered across his face. "You're up early," he said. "You said work starts at dawn. Didn't mean you had to beat the sun." "I don't do things halfway, Mr. Thornton." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Jake," he said. "Call me Jake. Mr. Thornton was my father." "Jake, then." He sat down at the table. She poured him coffee without being asked. He took a sip and raised an eyebrow. "Strong," he said. "Rosa said you take it that way." "Rosa talks too much. She told me not to fall in love with you." Jake choked on his coffee. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "I told her she didn't have to worry," Sarah continued, stirring the eggs. "I've already loved one man in my life. I don't intend to make that mistake again." Jake set down his cup. His eyes met hers. "Smart woman," he said quietly. "I try to be." They didn't speak again until breakfast was ready. Thomas appeared first, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Then Daniel, silent as always, clutching a wooden horse that had belonged to his father. Emma came last, carried in Rosa's arms. Found this one crying in the bunkhouse, Rosa said. Thought her mama had left her. Sarah's heart clenched. She took Emma from Rosa and held her close. I'm here, baby. Mama's not going anywhere. I promise. Emma buried her face in Sarah's neck and didn't let go. Jake watched the whole thing without expression, but something shifted in his eyes. Something that looked almost like pain. After breakfast, he stood and grabbed his hat. You coming? He said to Sarah. What about the children? Rosa will watch them. She's been begging for someone to fuss over. He headed for the door. First lesson starts now. Sarah followed him out into the morning light. He walked fast. She had to nearly jog to keep up. You know anything about horses? He asked, without slowing down. Not much. Cattle? Less. Chickens? Some. Then we start with chickens. The coop was behind the barn. Jake showed her how to rake out the floor, how to spread fresh straw, how to collect eggs without getting pecked. Sarah listened carefully, watched his hands, memorized every movement. When he finished demonstrating, he stepped back. Your turn. She took the rake. Her first stroke was clumsy, too hard. The chickens scattered in a panic of feathers and noise. Gentler, Jake said. They're animals, not enemies. She tried again. Better this time. Good. Now the feed. He handed her a bucket. She spread the grain the way he'd shown her. The chickens calmed, started eating. Not bad, Jake said, for a city woman. I'm not from the city. No? Kansas, farm country. My father raised wheat. Then why don't you know anything about animals? Sarah's jaw tightened. My father didn't believe women should work with livestock. Said it wasn't proper. Your father sounds like a fool. He was. Jake looked at her differently then, like he was seeing something new. Come on, he said. Barn's next. The barn was massive. It smelled like hay and horses and leather. Sarah stepped inside and immediately froze. A horse stood in the nearest stall. Huge, black, its eyes fixed on her. Her heart slammed against her ribs. What's wrong? Jake asked. Nothing. You're white as a ghost. I said nothing. She forced herself to move forward. 1 step. 2. The horse shifted, nickered softly. Sarah's legs locked. She couldn't move. Jake stepped in front of her, blocked her view of the horse. Hey, he said softly. Look at me. She looked at him. Her hands were shaking. What happened? He asked. I can't. Sarah, what happened with horses? She squeezed her eyes shut. The memory crashed over her like a wave. The sound of hooves, the scream, the blood. My husband, she whispered. He was sick. Cholera. Weak. He went to feed the horses anyway because no one else would do it. She paused. One of them got spooked. Kicked him in the head. He was dead before I reached him. Silence. Then Jake's hand touched her shoulder. Gentle. Steady. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't know. How could you? I should have asked. She opened her eyes. His face was close to hers. Closer than it should have been. We don't have to do horses today, he said. We can wait. No. She straightened her spine. I need to learn. The children need me to be strong. Being strong doesn't mean ignoring your fear. It means facing it when you're ready. I'm ready. You're not. How do you know? Because I've seen that look before. His voice dropped. I saw it in the mirror every day for a year after my wife died. Sarah stared at him. Rosa's warning echoed in her head. Don't fall in love with him. She stepped back. "Show me the cattle," she said. "I'll learn horses later." Jake watched her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Come on, then." The days blurred together after that. Sarah woke before dawn every morning, made coffee, cooked breakfast, then she worked alongside Jake until the sun went down. She learned to feed the cattle, mend fences, repair harnesses. She learned which weeds killed horses and which ones healed wounds. She learned to read the sky for weather and the ground for tracks. Her hands blistered, then calloused. Her muscles screamed, then strengthened. The children adapted too. Thomas took to ranch life like he'd been born to it. He followed Jake everywhere, asking questions, mimicking his walk, trying to talk like him. Daniel remained silent, but he started spending time in the barn with the horses. Jake found him there one evening, sitting in the corner of a stall, his hand resting on the leg of a pregnant mare. "He's got a gift," Jake told Sarah later. "Animals trust him. You can't teach that." Emma became Rosa's shadow. The old woman carried her everywhere, taught her Spanish words, braided her hair with ribbons she'd been saving for years. For the first time since they'd buried John McAllister in that unmarked grave, Sarah's children were thriving. But the town hadn't forgotten them. It happened 3 weeks after they arrived. Sarah went into Cedar Hollow with Jake to pick up supplies. She didn't want to go, didn't want to face those people again. But Jake said she needed to learn the route, learn the merchants, learn to handle the wagon alone. She agreed. Regretted it the moment they hit the main street. The whispers started immediately. "That's her, the widow. Shameless, moving in with a man she just met. I heard she was a saloon girl before. That's why her husband left. Those children probably aren't even hers." Sarah kept her eyes forward, her spine straight, her hands steady on her lap. But inside she was screaming. Jake stopped the wagon in front of the general store, the same one that had turned Sarah away. "Wait here," he said. "I'll come with you." "No, wait here." He jumped down and walked inside. Sarah sat alone on the wagon bench, feeling the weight of every stare. A woman approached, the same gray-haired woman from the boarding house. "Mrs. McAllister," she said. Her voice dripped with false sweetness. "Mrs. Crawford, I see you found accommodation." The woman's eyes swept over the wagon, the Thornton brand visible on the side. "Jake Thornton's ranch. My, you work fast." Sarah's hands curled into fists. "I work for Mr. Thornton, that's all." "Of course you do, dear. That's what they all say." Mrs. Crawford leaned closer. "Just so you know, we don't take kindly to women of questionable morals in Cedar Hollow. This is a Christian town." "I'm a Christian too, Mrs. Crawford. I just don't use my Bible as a weapon." The woman's face went red. "How dare you?" "Problem here?" Jake's voice cut through the air like a blade. He stood in the doorway of the general store, arms crossed, eyes hard. Mrs. Crawford stepped back. "Mr. Thornton, I was just welcoming Mrs. McAllister to our community." "Didn't look like a welcome to me." "I assure you, Mrs. Crawford," Jake stepped forward. "I've known you 30 years. I knew your husband before he passed. I know what kind of woman you are." He paused. "And I know what kind of woman Sarah McAllister is. She's the kind who walks 40 miles with 3 children and no food. The kind who begs for work when she could beg for charity. The kind who gets knocked down by people like you and gets back up anyway." His voice dropped. "She's worth 10 of you. Don't forget it." Mrs. Crawford's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Jake loaded the supplies into the wagon, climbed up beside Sarah, took the reins. "Let's go," he said. They rode in silence for a long time. Finally, Sarah spoke. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did." "She'll make trouble for you now. The whole town will talk." "Let them talk. I stopped caring what Cedar Hollow thought of me the day they let my wife and daughter die because the doctor was too drunk to make the ride." His jaw clenched. "Those people don't get to judge you. Not while I'm breathing." Sarah looked at him. Really looked at him. "Don't fall in love with him," Rosa had said. Too late, Sarah thought. Too damn late. But she said nothing, just watched the road ahead and tried to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah sat on the bunkhouse porch, watching the stars. Footsteps approached. Jake emerged from the darkness, 2 cups in his hands. "Coffee," he said, handing her one. "It's late for coffee." "It's late for sitting alone, too." He sat down beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. "Can't sleep?" "Too much thinking." "About what?" "Everything." "Nothing." She took a sip of coffee. "About what those women said today. About why you defended me. About whether this is real, or whether I'll wake up tomorrow and find out it was all a dream." Jake was quiet for a moment. "It's real," he said, finally. "Real as the dirt under your boots. Real as the work you've done. Real as those kids sleeping inside." "But for how long?" "What do you mean?" Sarah set down her cup, turned to face him. "Jake, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you the first day." His face didn't change. "I'm listening." "My husband had a brother, William. When John died, William came to claim everything. The farm, the equipment, the debts." She paused. "The children." Jake's expression hardened. "He wanted your children?" "He wanted what they represented. Control. Power. He's a cruel man, Jake. Cruel in ways I can't even describe." Her voice shook. "I ran because I had no choice. I took the children and I ran in the middle of the night and I didn't stop until I was 1,000 miles away." "Does he know where you are?" "No, at least I don't think so. But he'll look for me. He won't stop until he finds me." Silence stretched between them. Then Jake spoke, his voice low and steady. "Let him come." Sarah blinked. "What?" "Let him come. If he wants to take those children, he'll have to go through me first." Jake's eyes met hers in the darkness. "I told you the first day, Sarah. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a home. And in my home, we protect our own." "Your own?" "You've been here 3 weeks. You've worked harder than any hand I've ever hired. Your children laugh now. They smile. They call Rosa abuela, and Thomas follows me around like I'm some kind of hero." His voice softened. "You're not guests anymore. You're family." Sarah's throat tightened. Tears burned behind her eyes. "You don't know what that means to me," she whispered. "I think I do." He reached out. His hand covered hers. Warm, strong, certain. They sat there in the darkness, hands touching, watching the stars wheel overhead. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. The next morning, everything changed. Sarah was in the kitchen making breakfast when Thomas came running in, face flushed, eyes wide. "Mama! Mama, come quick!" "What is it? What's wrong?" "It's Daniel. He's talking, Mama. He's talking!" Sarah dropped the spoon she was holding. It clattered against the floor. She ran. Daniel was in the barn, standing beside the pregnant mare. Jake was crouched next to him, listening. And she's scared because the baby's coming, Daniel was saying. His voice was small and rusty from months of disuse. She told me. She doesn't want to be alone. Jake looked up as Sarah entered. His face was unreadable. Daniel, Sarah breathed. Baby, you're talking. Daniel turned to her. His eyes were clear for the first time since his father died. The horse needs help, Mama. The baby's coming wrong. Jake stood slowly. He's right. I noticed it yesterday. The foal's turned around. If we don't help her, we could lose them both. Can you fix it? I can try. What do you need? Someone to keep her calm. Jake looked at Daniel. Think you can do that? Daniel nodded solemnly. Then let's get to work. The next 3 hours were the longest of Sarah's life. She watched Jake work with his hands inside the mare, trying to turn the foal. She watched Daniel sit perfectly still, his small hand on the horse's neck, whispering words she couldn't hear. The mare screamed, kicked, thrashed, but every time she started to panic, Daniel whispered something, and she calmed. Almost there, Jake grunted. Almost there. He pulled his arms back. A moment later, a tiny head emerged, then legs, then a body, slick and wet and perfect. The foal lay in the straw, blinking at the world for the first time. Daniel laughed, actually laughed, a sound Sarah hadn't heard in so long she'd forgotten what it sounded like. She did it, Mama! She did it! Sarah pulled him into her arms and held him tight. Tears streamed down her face. You did it, baby. You saved them. You saved them both. Jake sat back against the stall wall, exhausted, covered in blood and fluid. But he was smiling. What should we name her? He asked Daniel. Daniel thought for a moment. Hope, he said. Because that's what she is. Jake looked at Sarah. She looked back at him. Hope, she thought. Yes, that's exactly what this is. A week later, a stranger rode into Cedar Hollow asking questions. He was tall, well-dressed, spoke with an accent that didn't belong in Texas. He showed a photograph to everyone he met. A photograph of a woman with 3 children. Have you seen her? He asked. She's my brother's widow. Those are my nieces and nephews. I'm very worried about them. The bartender at the saloon shook his head. The preacher at the church said he'd never seen her. The woman at the boarding house paused, thought about the widow who'd insulted her, thought about Jake Thornton defending her. You know, Mrs. Crawford said slowly, I think I might know where she is. The stranger smiled. Please, he said, tell me everything. William McAllister arrived at the Thornton Ranch on a Tuesday morning. Sarah was hanging laundry behind the bunkhouse when she heard the horse. She looked up, a wet shirt still in her hands, and her blood turned to ice. She knew that silhouette, knew that way of sitting in the saddle like he owned everything he surveyed, knew that cold, calculated stillness that preceded violence. The shirt fell from her hands. Thomas, she called, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. Take your brother and sister inside. Now. Thomas looked up from where he was stacking firewood. But Mama! Now, Thomas! Don't argue, don't ask questions, just go. Something in her voice must have told him this was different. He grabbed Daniel's hand, scooped Emma from the dirt where she was playing, and ran toward the bunkhouse. Sarah didn't watch them go. Her eyes were fixed on the rider approaching the main house. Jake stepped out onto the porch. He'd seen the stranger too. Sarah forced her legs to move. One step, then another. Then she was walking, then running, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She reached Jake just as William dismounted. Well, well, William said. His voice hadn't changed, smooth as silk, and twice as slippery. "Hello, Sarah. You're looking domestic." Jake stepped forward. "Can I help you?" William smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. It never did. "You must be Thornton, the rancher." He looked Jake up and down like he was measuring livestock. "I've heard interesting things about you. About your charity toward wayward women. State your business or get off my land." "Direct. I appreciate that." William removed his riding gloves, one finger at a time. "I'm William McAllister. I believe you're harboring my brother's widow and children." "I'm not harboring anyone. Mrs. McAllister works for me. Legally. Honestly." "Mrs. McAllister." William laughed softly. "Is that what she's calling herself? How quaint." He turned to Sarah.
"Did you tell him the truth, darling? Did you tell him about the debts, the lies, the way you stole those children in the dead of night?"
Sarah's hands trembled.
"I didn't steal my own children."
"The courts might disagree. Your husband, my brother, left everything to me. The farm, the equipment, the guardianship of his offspring." William pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I have documents." "Those documents are forgeries and you know it." "Do I?" William's smile widened. "Prove it." Jake took another step forward. His voice dropped to a dangerous register. "I think it's time you leave." "I think it's time you stay out of family business." William's eyes flicked to Sarah. "I'm giving you a choice, Sarah. Come with me willingly, you and the children, and I won't press charges for abandonment and theft. Refuse, and I'll have the sheriff here by sundown." "The sheriff won't help you." "Won't he?" William tilted his head. "Thomas Wade, decent man, follows the law to the letter, and the law says those children belong with their legal guardian." He paused. "That would be me." Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for, slipping away. "You don't want those children," she said quietly. "You never did. You want what they represent. Control over John's estate. Control over me." "Does it matter what I want? The law is the law." "Then let the law decide." Everyone turned. Rosa stood in the doorway of the main house, arms crossed, chin high. "You want those children so bad, you take it to a judge, a real judge, not some bought sheriff in a nothing town." Rosa stepped forward. "I know men like you, seen them all my life. You talk big, wave papers around, make threats, but when it comes time to stand before God and the law, you run." William's smile flickered, just for a moment. "And who are you supposed to be?" "I'm the woman who's going to make sure you don't take one step closer to those babies." Rosa pulled back her shawl, revealing the pistol tucked into her belt. "Now get off this land before I forget I'm a Christian." The silence stretched, thick, heavy. William looked at Jake, at Rosa, at Sarah. Then he laughed. "This isn't over," he said, pulling on his gloves. "I'll be back, with the law, with documents that will stand up in any court." He mounted his horse. "Enjoy your little family, Sarah. It won't last." He rode away without looking back. Sarah's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Jake hadn't caught her. "I've got you," he said. "I've got you." But she barely heard him. All she could think about was William's smile, that cold, knowing smile. He would be back, and next time he wouldn't come alone. The next 3 days were the longest of Sarah's life. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow made her heart race. Jake tried to comfort her. Rosa tried to distract her. But nothing worked. On the 4th day, Sarah made a decision. She found Jake in the barn, repairing a broken harness. He looked up when she entered. "I need to leave," she said. Jake set down his tools. "No. You don't understand. William will destroy you. He'll destroy this ranch, everything you've built. He has money, connections, power. He'll bury you." "Let him try." "Jake, please." "No." He stood and crossed the distance between them. "You're not running anymore. Not from him. Not from anyone." "This isn't your fight." "It became my fight the day I stopped that wagon." His hands gripped her shoulders. "Sarah, look at me." She looked. "I've spent 3 years living like a ghost in my own house, working myself to exhaustion so I wouldn't have to feel, pushing away everyone who tried to get close." His voice cracked. "Then you showed up. You and those kids. And suddenly this place felt like home again."
"Jake."
"I'm not losing that. Not to William McAllister. Not to anyone." His forehead touched hers. "We fight this together. Understand?" Sarah closed her eyes. Tears slid down her cheeks. "Together," she whispered. They stood there in the barn, holding each other, while somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. The storm broke that night. Not just rain, a full-blown Texas tempest. Wind that screamed through the rafters, lightning that split the sky, thunder that shook the earth. Sarah gathered the children in the main house. Rosa made hot cocoa. Jake checked the animals. Around midnight, Thomas tugged at Sarah's sleeve.
"Mama, someone's outside."
Sarah's blood went cold.
"What?" "I saw a light by the barn."
Jake grabbed his rifle. "Stay here, all of you." "I'm coming with you," Sarah said. "No." "Jake Thornton, I swear to God." "Fine, but stay behind me." They stepped out into the storm. Rain lashed at their faces. Lightning illuminated the yard in stark white flashes. Jake raised his rifle. "Who's there?" A figure emerged from the darkness, stumbling, bleeding, falling to their knees in the mud. It was a young man, maybe 20 years old. His face was battered, his clothes were torn, blood poured from a gash on his forehead. "Please," he gasped, "help me." Jake lowered the rifle slightly. "Who did this to you?" "3 men, on the road. They took everything. My horse, my money, my—" He coughed. Blood flecked his lips. "Please, I don't have anywhere else to go." Sarah pushed past Jake and knelt in the mud beside the stranger. "We need to get him inside." "We don't know who he is." "He's dying, Jake. We can ask questions later." They carried him into the house. Rosa took one look at his wounds and started barking orders. Hot water, clean cloths, whiskey for the pain. The young man drifted in and out of consciousness while Rosa worked. Sarah held his hand. Jake watched from the doorway, rifle still in hand. Finally, Rosa stepped back. "He'll live, but he needs rest. A lot of it." The young man's eyes fluttered open. They focused on Sarah. "Thank you," he whispered. "You saved my life." "What's your name?" "Henry. Henry Cole." He tried to sit up, winced, lay back down. "I was heading to Cedar Hollow, looking for work. Those men came out of nowhere." "What did they look like?" 3 brothers. The leader had a scar on his neck, called himself Dawson. Jake stiffened. Sarah looked at him. "You know them?" "The Dawson brothers, outlaws, been terrorizing this county for years." Jake's jaw tightened. "Sheriff Wade's been after them, but they always slip away." "Why would they attack a random traveler?" "They don't need a reason. They do it for sport." Henry shook his head weakly. "It wasn't random. They asked about a woman, a widow with 3 children. Asked if I'd seen her. His eyes met Sarah's. They're looking for you, ma'am, and they're not planning to ask politely when they find you. Sarah's heart stopped. The Dawson brothers. William had hired the Dawson brothers. He's not going to take me to court, she said softly. He's going to take the children by force. Jake's face hardened into something dangerous. Then we need to be ready. The next morning, Jake rode to Cedar Hollow alone. Sarah begged him not to go. Rosa threatened to shoot his horse, but Jake wouldn't listen. I need to talk to Sheriff Wade, he said. He needs to know what's coming. What if the Dawsons find you? They won't. Jake, I'll be back by sundown, I promise. He kissed her forehead, the first time he'd ever done that. Then he mounted his horse and rode away. Sarah watched until he disappeared over the hill. Then she went to check on Henry. The young man was sitting up, color returning to his face. Feeling better? Sarah asked. Much. Rosa's a miracle worker. He paused. I'm sorry for bringing trouble to your door. You didn't bring it. It was already coming. That man, William. He's your brother-in-law? Sarah nodded. And the Dawsons work for him? Apparently. Henry was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I know the Dawson brothers. Know them better than I should. Sarah looked at him sharply. How? I rode with them 2 years ago, before I realized what kind of men they really were. He met her eyes. I know how they think, how they operate. If you'll let me, I can help. Why would you help us? Because you saved my life when you didn't have to. Because those children deserve to grow up safe. Because... He stopped. Because I've done bad things, ma'am, and maybe this is my chance to do something good. Sarah studied his face, looking for the lie, looking for the trap. She found only sincerity, and desperation, and guilt. What do you know? She asked. Henry told her everything. The Dawsons always attacked at night. They scouted for days before making their move. They never struck when they were outnumbered. And they always had an escape route planned. They're cowards at heart, Henry said. They pick on the weak because they're afraid of the strong. If you show them you're ready to fight, they'll back down. And if they don't, then you fight. Henry's eyes hardened. And you win. Jake returned at sunset. His face was grim. Sheriff Wade is gone, he said. Left 2 days ago to chase a lead on a cattle rustling case. Won't be back for a week. William planned this, Sarah said. He knew the sheriff would be away. Seems like it. So we're on our own. Jake took her hands. We've always been on our own. That's not going to stop us now. That night, they prepared for war. Jake distributed weapons, a rifle for himself, a pistol for Rosa, a shotgun for Sarah. Even Henry, still weak but determined, insisted on helping. I can shoot, he said. Just prop me up near a window. The children were hidden in the cellar beneath the main house. Thomas wanted to fight. Sarah refused. Your job is to protect your brother and sister, she told him. That's the most important job of all. Thomas's jaw tightened. He looked so much like his father in that moment that Sarah's heart ached. Yes, Mama, he said finally. She hugged him tight. I love you, all of you. No matter what happens tonight, remember that. We'll remember. They climbed down into the cellar. The door closed behind them. Sarah stood in the darkness of the main house, shotgun in her hands, and waited. The attack came at midnight. 3 riders, moving fast, torches in their hands. Jake fired first. The shot echoed across the valley. One of the riders fell. The other 2 scattered, disappeared into the darkness. That's Billy Dawson, Henry called from his window. The youngest. You got him good. 2 more, Jake said. Where are they? Silence. Then the barn exploded. Fire erupted into the night sky. The horses screamed. "No!" Sarah ran for the door.
Jake grabbed her arm. "Wait!" A shot rang out. Glass shattered. Jake grunted and fell.
"Jake!" Sarah dropped beside him. Blood poured from his shoulder. "I'm fine," he gasped. "Just a graze. Go help the horses." "I can't leave you." "Go. Those animals will die." Sarah ran. The barn was an inferno. Flames licked at the walls. Smoke billowed into the sky. She could hear the horses inside, screaming, thrashing. She didn't think, just acted. She kicked open the barn door and plunged into the smoke. The heat was unbearable. Her eyes burned. Her lungs screamed. But she kept moving. Hope was in the first stall, the foal Daniel had saved. She was wild with terror, kicking at the walls. Sarah threw open the stall door. "Go! Run!" Hope bolted past her, out into the night. One down. Sarah moved to the next stall, and the next, and the next. 3 horses, 4, 5. Her vision blurred, her strength faded. One more, just one more. She stumbled to the last stall, a massive stallion, Jake's favorite. The animal was down, legs tangled in rope. Sarah fell to her knees, started cutting. The rope snapped. The stallion struggled to its feet. "Go," Sarah whispered. "Please, go." The horse ran. Sarah tried to follow, but her legs wouldn't work. The roof groaned, cracked, started to fall. And then someone was there, arms around her, lifting her, carrying her out. They burst through the barn door just as the roof collapsed behind them. Sarah coughed, gasped, looked up at her rescuer. It was Rosa. The old woman's face was covered in soot. Her clothes were singed, but her eyes were fierce. "Don't you ever scare me like that again," Rosa said. Sarah almost laughed, almost cried. "The horses," she managed. "All safe, thanks to you." The barn burned, but the animals lived. And somewhere in the chaos, the remaining Dawson brothers fled into the night. Dawn came slowly. Sarah sat on the porch, watching the smoke rise from what was left of the barn. Her hands were bandaged, her throat was raw. Jake sat beside her, his shoulder wrapped tight. He hadn't let go of her hands since she'd come out of that fire. "We won," he said quietly. "Did we? The barn's gone. The Dawsons escaped. William's still out there. But we're alive, all of us. The children are safe." Sarah closed her eyes. He was right. They were alive. That was what mattered. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We rebuild, same as we always do." Jake squeezed her hand. "But first, we go to Greeley. Find a judge who can't be bought. File proper papers. Make sure William can never touch those children again." "You'd do that? Go to court for us?" "I'd do anything for you, Sarah." His voice dropped. "Thought you knew that by now." She looked at him, at this man who had asked her one question when no one else would give her the time of day. This man who had defended her against a town, who had taken a bullet defending her children, who had never once asked for anything in return. "Jake Thornton," she said softly. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I reckon I am." "You barely know me." "I know everything I need to know." "I have 3 children." "I've noticed." "I have an enemy who will never stop hunting me." "Then it's good you've got someone to stand beside you." He turned to face her fully. "Sarah McAllister, I've been alone too long. This ranch has been empty too long. I'm not asking you to love me today. I'm asking for a chance to build something, together." Sarah's heart pounded. Every logical part of her screamed that this was too fast, too dangerous, too much. But logic had never gotten her anywhere. "Yes," she whispered. Jake blinked. "Yes?" "Yes. To all of it. The court, the papers, the chance." She touched his face. "But Jake, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same woman who stepped off that stagecoach 2 months ago. I've changed. This place has changed me. I know. And if we do this, we do it as equals, partners. I won't be owned again. I wouldn't want to own you, Sarah. I just want to stand beside you." She leaned forward, pressed her forehead to his. "Then we're partners." Partners. Behind them, the sun finally broke free of the horizon. And somewhere in the cellar, 3 children slept peacefully, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. They left for Greeley 3 days later. Jake's shoulder was healing faster than Sarah expected. Rosa had bound it tight with herbs and prayers and threats of violence if he didn't rest. He ignored most of her advice, but he was alive, and that was what mattered. The journey would take 2 days by wagon. Sarah sat beside Jake on the driver's bench, the children tucked safely in the back with blankets and supplies. Henry rode alongside on a borrowed horse, still weak, but determined to see this through. "You don't have to come," Sarah had told him. "Yes, I do," he'd replied. "I know William's type. I know how men like him operate. You'll need someone who can speak their language." Rosa stayed behind to guard the ranch. She stood on the porch as they pulled away, pistol on her hip, watching them go. "You bring those babies back safe," she called out. "Or don't come back at all." Jake raised his hand in acknowledgement. Sarah didn't trust her voice to respond. The first day passed without incident. They made camp near a creek, ate cold biscuits and dried meat, watched the children fall asleep under a canopy of stars. Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire, staring into the flames, running through every possible outcome in her mind. Jake sat down beside her. "Thinking too much," he said. "Can't help it. Whatever happens in that courtroom, we face it together, remember?" "I remember." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm just scared, Jake. I've never had anything worth losing before. Now I have everything." His arm wrapped around her, steady, strong. "You're not going to lose them. I won't let that happen." "You can't promise that." "I just did." She closed her eyes, let herself believe him, just for tonight. They arrived in Greeley late the following afternoon. It was bigger than Cedar Hollow. More buildings, more people, more noise. Sarah felt exposed, vulnerable, like every eye on the street was watching her. Jake found a boarding house near the courthouse, paid for 2 rooms, told the owner they were family. "You need a lawyer," Henry said as they settled in. "A good one. Someone William can't buy." "You know anyone?" "There's a man named Mitchell, Abraham Mitchell. He defended my cousin once. Honest, sharp, doesn't back down from a fight." "Can we trust him?" "More than anyone else in this town." Jake looked at Sarah. She nodded. "Take me to him," Jake said. Abraham Mitchell's office sat above a dry goods store on the main street. The stairs creaked. The door needed oil. But the man who rose from behind the desk had eyes that missed nothing. He was older than Sarah expected. Gray beard, weathered face, hands that looked more like a farmer's than a lawyer's. "Jake Thornton," he said, extending his hand. "Heard about the fire at your ranch. Heard about the Dawsons, too." "Word travels fast." "Word always travels when the Dawsons are involved." Mitchell's gaze shifted to Sarah. "And you must be the widow everyone's talking about." Sarah McAllister. Soon to be Sarah Thornton, if the rumors are true. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. The rumors are premature. Are they? Mitchell smiled slightly. Sit down. Tell me what you need. They told him everything. John's death, William's claims, the forged documents, the attack on the ranch. All of it. Mitchell listened without interrupting. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. William McAllister, he said slowly. I know the name. He's been acquiring property all across Kansas and Colorado. Legally questionable methods, but nothing anyone could prove. He paused. Until now. What do you mean? I mean, you're the first person who stood up to him. The first person willing to fight. Mitchell leaned forward. If we can prove those guardianship documents are forged, we don't just save your children. We expose his entire operation. How do we prove they're forged? We find witnesses, people who knew your husband, people who can testify to his intentions. Mitchell stood and moved to a filing cabinet. I've been collecting information on McAllister for 2 years, waiting for the right case, the right people. He pulled out a thick folder. I think you might be them. Sarah's heart pounded. What do you need us to do? First, we file for emergency custody protection. That buys us time. Then we subpoena William's documents and have them examined by an expert. Mitchell's eyes hardened. And then we expose him for what he really is. He won't go down without a fight, Jake said. No, he won't. Mitchell looked at both of them. Are you prepared for that? Really prepared? This man has destroyed families, ruined lives. He won't hesitate to do the same to you. Sarah thought of her children, of Thomas's determined jaw, of Daniel's newfound voice, of Emma's laughter. I've already lost everything once, she said. I won't lose it again. Mitchell nodded slowly. Then let's get to work. The next 3 days were a blur of paperwork and preparation. Mitchell filed motion after motion. Emergency custody protection. Request for document examination. Subpoena for William McAllister to appear before the court. William's response came swift and vicious. His lawyers filed counter-motions, character attacks, claims that Sarah had abandoned her children repeatedly, claims that she was mentally unstable, claims that she had been intimate with multiple men since her husband's death. Sarah read the accusations with shaking hands. These are lies, she whispered. All of them. I know, Mitchell said, and we'll prove it. How? It's his word against mine. Not anymore. Mitchell pulled out a telegram. I received this an hour ago, from a woman named Margaret Cole, your husband's former housekeeper. Sarah's breath caught. Margaret. She was with us for years. She left after John got sick. She's willing to testify. She says she witnessed William threatening your husband weeks before his death, trying to force him to sign over the property. Mitchell's eyes met Sarah's. She says your husband refused, said his children would inherit everything when they came of age, that William would get nothing. William killed him, Sarah breathed. He killed John. We can't prove that. Not yet. But we can prove the documents are forged. We can prove William had motive. And we can destroy his credibility in front of a judge. The hearing was set for Friday. Sarah couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She paced her room at the boarding house until Jake finally took her by the shoulders and forced her to sit. You're going to wear a hole in the floor, he said. I can't help it. Everything depends on tomorrow. Not everything, just the legal part. He knelt in front of her. Sarah, listen to me. Whatever that judge decides, those are your children. They love you. They need you. No piece of paper is going to change that. But if William wins, he won't. But if he does, then we run. Jake's voice was quiet, but fierce. We pack up tonight and we disappear. Head west. California, Oregon. Somewhere he can never find us. Sarah stared at him. "You'd do that? Give up your ranch? Your home?" "My home is wherever you are." He touched her face.
Don't you understand that yet? Tears spilled down her cheeks. She couldn't stop them. "I love you," she whispered. The words came out before she could stop them. "I know I shouldn't. I know it's too soon. But I do." Jake's eyes softened. "It's not too soon. It's exactly right." He kissed her then. Gentle. Certain. A promise sealed without words. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah was trembling. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," he agreed. And every day after that. The courthouse was packed. Word had spread about the case. The widow versus the wealthy businessman. David versus Goliath. People came from miles around to watch. Sarah walked through the crowd with her head high. Jake was beside her. Henry behind her. Mitchell led the way. William was already there. He sat at the opposite table with his team of lawyers. 3 of them. All in expensive suits. All with smug expressions. William caught Sarah's eye and smiled. She didn't look away. The judge entered, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. Judge Helena Blackwood. Sarah had never heard of a woman judge before. Mitchell leaned close. "She's fair. Tough, but fair. Don't let William's lawyers rattle you." The hearing began. William's lawyers spoke first. They painted Sarah as unstable, unfit, dangerous. They presented the guardianship documents. They called witnesses who claimed to have seen Sarah behaving erratically. Sarah listened to lie after lie. Her hands clenched so tight, her nails drew blood from her palms. Then it was Mitchell's turn. He called his own witnesses first. Neighbors from Kansas who testified to Sarah's character. A doctor who had treated her children and found them healthy, happy, well cared for. Then he called Margaret Cole. The former housekeeper was older than Sarah remembered. Grayer. But her eyes were the same. Sharp. Honest. "Mrs. Cole," Mitchell said, "did you work for John McAllister?" "For 6 years, until he got sick." "And in that time, did you ever witness any conversations between John McAllister and his brother William?" "Several." "Can you describe the last one?" Margaret's jaw tightened. "It was 3 weeks before John died. William came to the house, demanding that John sign papers, legal papers, giving William control of everything." "And what did John say?" "He refused, said his children would inherit when they came of age, said William would never touch a penny." The courtroom murmured. William's lawyers objected. The judge overruled them. "What happened then?" Mitchell asked. "William threatened him, said if John didn't sign, he'd regret it." Margaret's voice shook. 2 weeks later, John was dead, and William showed up with documents claiming full guardianship. "Objection!" William's lead lawyer shot to his feet. "This is hearsay and speculation." "Your Honor," Mitchell said calmly, "I have a handwriting expert prepared to testify that the signatures on William McAllister's guardianship documents do not match any known samples of John McAllister's handwriting." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. "Order! Order in this court!" Sarah's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. William's face had gone pale. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. "Bring in the expert," the judge ordered. The handwriting expert was a small man with thick spectacles and a nervous habit of adjusting his collar. But his testimony was devastating. "The signatures are not a match," he stated clearly. "The documents appear to have been forged by someone who had access to samples of Mr. John McAllister's handwriting, but who made several telltale errors in replication." "In your professional opinion,"
Mitchell asked. "Are these documents legitimate?" "No, sir, they are not." William's lawyers tried to object, tried to discredit the expert, tried to introduce their own experts. The judge cut them off. "I've heard enough." She looked directly at William. "Mr. McAllister, these are serious allegations. Forgery, fraud, potentially worse." She paused. "I am ordering a full investigation into the origins of these documents. In the meantime, custody of the McAllister children will remain with their mother, Sarah McAllister." Sarah's legs gave out. She would have collapsed if Jake hadn't caught her. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "Mr. William McAllister is barred from any contact with the children or their mother pending investigation. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest." William stood so fast, his chair toppled backward. "This is outrageous. I am a respected businessman. I will not be treated like a common criminal." "Then perhaps you should not have behaved like one." The judge banged her gavel. "Court is adjourned." The crowd surged. Reporters shouted questions. People pressed forward, trying to get a better look. Sarah felt Jake's arm around her, guiding her through the chaos. Mitchell ran interference, pushing people aside. They made it outside. Fresh air. Open sky. Sarah started laughing. She couldn't help it. After everything, after all the fear and the running and the fighting, she had won. "We did it," she gasped. "We actually did it." Jake was grinning. "You did it." "We both did." Henry appeared beside them. His face was grim. "Don't celebrate yet," he said quietly. "Look." Sarah followed his gaze. William stood across the street. His lawyers were gone. His confident swagger was gone. All that remained was cold, naked fury. He looked directly at Sarah, and he smiled. That same cold smile he'd given her at the ranch. The smile that promised this wasn't over. Then he turned and walked away. Sarah's laughter died in her throat. "He's not going to stop," she said. "Is he?" Jake's arm tightened around her. "Neither are we." They returned to the boarding house to find chaos. The owner met them at the door, her face white with fear. "Someone was here," she gasped, "while you were gone. They went through your rooms, took things." Sarah's blood went cold. "The children. Where are my children?" "Upstairs. They're fine. I hid them in the cellar when I heard the noise." Sarah ran. Up the stairs, down the hall. She threw open the door to find Thomas standing guard in front of his siblings, a fireplace poker clutched in his small hands. "Mama!" She gathered all three of them in her arms, held them so tight they could barely breathe. "Are you okay? Did anyone hurt you?" "We're fine, Mama. Mrs. Patterson hit us." Thomas's voice shook despite his brave face. "But they took your papers, the ones Mr. Mitchell gave you." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Which papers?" "The ones with the lady's testimony. The housekeeper." Margaret Cole's sworn statement. The key evidence that had turned the case. Someone had stolen it. Mitchell arrived an hour later. His face was grave. "It doesn't matter," he said. "The judge has already ruled. Margaret can provide another statement." "But if William destroys the original?" "He can't unring the bell. The expert testimony is part of the court record. The investigation has been ordered." Mitchell put his hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You won. He's just trying to scare you." "It's working." "Then don't let it." Mitchell's eyes hardened. "Men like William McAllister count on fear. It's their greatest weapon. You take that away, and they have nothing." Jake stepped forward. "We need to leave. Tonight. Get back to the ranch before he tries anything else." "Agreed." Mitchell handed Jake a sealed envelope. "The official custody order. Guard it with your life. And send word if anything happens. Anything at all."
"Thank you," Sarah said, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet. The investigation will take months. William has resources, connections. He'll fight this every step of the way."
Mitchell shook her hand firmly.
"But you've already proven something important."
"What's that?"
"That he can be beaten."
They left Greeley under cover of darkness. Jake pushed the horses hard. Henry rode ahead, scouting the road. Sarah sat in the back with the children, a shotgun across her lap. No one spoke. The tension was thick enough to choke on. They were halfway home when Henry came riding back, fast. "Riders," he said. "3 of them, coming up behind us." Jake pulled the wagon off the road into a cluster of trees. Cut the horses loose so they wouldn't make noise. "Stay here," he told Sarah. "I'm coming with you."
"No, you stay with the children. If something happens to me—"
"Nothing is going to happen to you." He looked at her. In the moonlight, his face was all shadows and determination.
"If something happens," he said quietly, "you take the children and you run. You don't look back. You don't stop. You get them somewhere safe."
"Jake, promise me." Sarah swallowed hard.
"I promise."
He kissed her forehead. Then he was gone, melting into the darkness with Henry beside him. Sarah gathered the children close. Her finger rested on the shotgun trigger. The minutes stretched. Each second felt like an hour. Then gunshots. 3 of them. Then shouting. Then silence. Sarah's heart stopped. Footsteps approached, heavy, slow. She raised the shotgun. A figure emerged from the trees. Jake. Blood on his shirt, but standing, breathing. "It's over," he said. "The Dawson brothers won't bother anyone ever again." Sarah lowered the shotgun. Her whole body was shaking.
"Are you hurt?"
"It's not my blood." She ran to him, threw her arms around him, didn't care about the blood or the dirt or the danger.
"I thought I lost you,"
she whispered. "Never."
His arms wrapped around her.
"You're stuck with me now, Sarah McAllister."
"Promise?"
"Promise." They made it back to the ranch as the sun rose. Rosa was waiting on the porch, rifle in hand. When she saw them, she lowered the weapon and pressed her hand to her heart.
"Thank God," she breathed. "Thank God."
The children tumbled out of the wagon, running to Rosa, talking over each other about the adventure. Sarah climbed down slowly. Every muscle ached. Every bone felt heavy. But she was home. Jake came up beside her. His hand found hers. "We made it," he said. She looked at the ranch, the burned-out barn, the house that needed paint, the land that stretched endlessly toward the mountains. "We made it," she agreed. And then, for the first time and longer than she could remember, Sarah McAllister let herself cry. Not from fear, not from grief, from relief, from joy, from the overwhelming realization that she had found something she never thought she'd find again. A home.
A family. A future. Jake held her while she wept. Didn't say a word, just held her. When the tears finally stopped, she looked up at him. "So," she said, "what now?" He smiled, that rare, gentle smile that transformed his weathered face.
"Now," he said, "we live." The weeks that followed were the quietest Sarah had ever known. Not quiet in the sense of silence. The ranch was never silent. There were children laughing, horses whinnying, Rosa singing Spanish hymns while she cooked. But quiet in the way that mattered. No threats lurking around corners. No nightmares jolting her awake. No constant looking over her shoulder. For the first time in her life, Sarah McAllister knew peace. They rebuilt the barn together, all of them. Jake and Henry did the heavy lifting. Thomas handed them nails and held boards steady. Daniel worked with the horses, keeping them calm while the hammering echoed across the valley. Even Emma helped, carrying water to the workers and placing wildflowers in their hair when they weren't looking. Sarah watched from the porch one afternoon, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands. Rosa came up beside her. "You're staring," the old woman said. "I'm allowed to stare. It's my family." Rosa made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your family. Listen to you." "What?" "Nothing. Just remembering the woman who showed up here 2 months ago. Scared. Broken. Ready to run at the first sign of trouble." Sarah's jaw tightened. "I was never broken." "No, you weren't." Rosa's voice softened. "Bent, maybe, but never broken. That's why he loves you." Sarah looked at Jake. He was lifting a beam with Henry, muscles straining, sweat dripping down his face. He caught her looking and smiled. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. "I love him too," she said quietly. "Is that crazy? After everything?" "Love is always crazy. That's what makes it love." The barn was finished by the end of the month. They held a small celebration. Rosa cooked enough food for 20 people. Henry played a fiddle he'd found in the attic. The children danced until they collapsed. Jake pulled Sarah aside as the sun set. "Come with me," he said. She followed him to the corral where the horses stood in the golden light. Hope, the foal Daniel had saved, was bigger now. Strong. Beautiful. "I have something for you," Jake said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Sarah's breath caught. "Jake." "It was my mother's." He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple. Silver. A single small stone that caught the fading light. "She told my father she'd only marry him if he found a ring as honest as his heart. He searched for 3 months before he found this one." Sarah's eyes burned. "It's beautiful." "So are you." Jake took her hand. "Sarah McAllister, I know I'm not much. I've got a ranch that barely breaks even, a face that scares children, and a past I don't talk about. But I love you. I love your children. I love the way you fight, and the way you laugh, and the way you never, ever give up." He paused. "Marry me. Not because you need protection, not because you need a home, but because I can't imagine spending another day without you." Sarah looked at the ring, looked at Jake, looked at the life stretching out before her. "Yes," she said. Jake blinked. "Yes?" "Yes, Jake Thornton. I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he kissed her. Not gentle this time, not careful. A kiss that promised everything and held nothing back. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow. Next week. Right now. I don't care." "Let's give Rosa time to plan. She'll kill us both if we don't." Jake laughed, a real laugh, full and warm. 2 weeks then. 2 weeks. They walked back to the house, hand in hand, and for the first time since John had died, Sarah felt truly whole. The news spread fast. By the next morning, half of Cedar Hollow knew that Jake Thornton was marrying the widow. By afternoon, the other half was arguing about whether to attend. Mrs. Crawford was the loudest objector. "It's indecent," she announced to anyone who would listen. "That woman has been here barely 3 months. What kind of example does this set for our young people?" But Mrs. Crawford found herself increasingly alone. The people who had once whispered about Sarah now nodded to her on the street.
The general store owner, who had thrown her out, offered a discount on supplies. The preacher who had turned her away came to the ranch personally to apologize. "I was wrong," he said, hat in hand, eyes on the ground. "I let fear guide me instead of faith. I hope you can forgive me." Sarah looked at this man who had made her feel worthless, who had sent her away hungry and desperate. Every instinct told her to slam the door in his face. Instead, she said, "Come to the wedding, Reverend. Forgiveness is what we're supposed to do, isn't it?" He looked up, surprise in his eyes. "You'd want me there?" "I want everyone there. This is a new beginning, for all of us." The Reverend nodded slowly. "Then I'll be honored to perform the ceremony." When he left, Jake came up behind her. "That took courage," he said. "That took something." "I'm not sure it was courage." "What then?" Sarah thought about it. "Hope, maybe. Hope that people can change." "Can they?" "I did." She turned to face him. "So did you." He kissed her forehead. "So did I." The investigation into William McAllister continued. Letters came from Mitchell every few days. More witnesses had come forward. More evidence had been found. The web of fraud William had built was beginning to unravel. But William himself had disappeared. He'd fled Greeley the night of the hearing. No one knew where he'd gone. Some said Mexico. Some said California. Some said he'd changed his name and vanished into the territories. Sarah tried not to think about it, tried to focus on the wedding, on the children, on the life she was building. But late at night, when the house was quiet and Jake was sleeping beside her, she would sometimes lie awake and wonder, where was he? And was he coming back? The answer came 5 days before the wedding. Sarah was in the kitchen, helping Rosa prepare food, when Thomas came running in. "Mama, there's a man at the gate!" Sarah's blood went cold. "What man?" "I don't know. He's just standing there, staring at the house." Jake was already moving toward the door, rifle in hand. "Stay inside," he told Sarah. "All of you." "Jake." "I mean it. Stay." He walked out. Sarah watched through the window, her heart pounding. The man at the gate was thin, ragged, nothing like the polished businessman she remembered. But she would recognize that silhouette anywhere. William. Jake raised the rifle. "You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here." William didn't move. "I'm not here to fight." "Then why are you here?" "To see her." William's voice was hollow, empty. "One last time." Jake's jaw tightened. "She doesn't want to see you." "Let her speak for herself." Sarah's hand was on the door handle before she realized she'd moved. Rosa grabbed her arm. "Don't!" the old woman hissed. "It's a trap!" "Maybe," Sarah pulled free. "But I need to end this, once and for all." She walked outside, stood beside Jake, faced the man who had haunted her nightmares for months. William looked terrible. His clothes were torn. His face was gaunt. His eyes had the hollow look of a man who had lost everything. "Sarah," he said. Just her name, nothing else. "What do you want, William?" "I wanted—" He stopped, swallowed. "I wanted to apologize." Sarah stared at him. Of all the things she'd expected, an apology wasn't one of them. "Apologize," she repeated flatly. "I know what I did. I know how I treated you, how I tried to take your children." His voice cracked. "I was so consumed with hatred, with greed. I couldn't see what I was becoming." "And now you can?" "Now I've lost everything. My money, my reputation, my freedom." He laughed bitterly. "The law caught up with me in Denver. I'm being sent back to Kansas to stand trial. They gave me 1 day to set my affairs in order. He looked at her with those hollow eyes. I spent it coming here. Why? Because I needed you to know something. He took a step forward. Jake raised the rifle higher. William stopped. John loved you. My brother loved you more than anything in this world. And I was jealous. Jealous of what you had. Jealous of the family you built. So I tried to destroy it. Sarah felt something twist in her chest. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, but something close to understanding. I know, she said quietly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. For everything. They stood there in silence. The wind moved through the grass. Somewhere, a bird called. Then Sarah spoke. Go back to Kansas, William. Face what you did. Pay for your crimes. She paused. Maybe someday, years from now, I'll be able to forgive you. But not today. William nodded slowly. Fair enough. He turned to go, then stopped. Sarah. What? Those children. His voice was barely a whisper. Take care of them. They're all that's left of John. I know. He looked at her one last time. Then he walked away. Sarah watched until he disappeared over the hill. Then her legs gave out. Jake caught her, held her. It's over, he said. It's really over. I know. She pressed her face against his chest. I know. The wedding took place on a perfect summer morning. Sarah wore a dress Rosa had made by hand. White cotton with blue ribbons. Simple. Beautiful. Perfect. The entire town came. Even Mrs. Crawford, who sat in the back row and cried through the whole ceremony. Apparently, she had a soft spot for love stories after all. Henry stood beside Jake as best man. The children stood beside Sarah. The Reverend spoke about love and commitment and second chances, about how sometimes the greatest blessings come from the darkest moments. Sarah barely heard him. She was too busy looking at Jake, this man who had stopped his wagon on a dusty road, who had asked her one question when no one else would give her the time of day, who had fought for her, bled for her, loved her when she didn't think she could be loved again. Do you, Sarah McAllister, take this man to be your husband? I do. Do you, Jacob Thornton, take this woman to be your wife? I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. The Reverend smiled. You may kiss your bride. Jake lifted her veil. His eyes were wet. Hello, Mrs. Thornton, he whispered. Hello, Mr. Thornton. He kissed her. The crowd cheered. The children rushed forward to embrace them both. And Sarah Thornton, who had once walked into this valley with nothing but her children and her desperation, knew that she had finally found home. The months that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered. The crops came in strong. The cattle multiplied. For the first time in years, there was enough money to hire help. Henry stayed on as foreman. He'd changed since that night he'd stumbled onto the ranch, bloody and broken. He stood taller now, smiled more. Jake said he'd never had a better hand. The children thrived. Thomas grew like a weed, shooting up until he was almost as tall as Jake. He worked the ranch with fierce dedication, learning everything he could about horses and cattle and land. He talked about running his own spread someday. Jake promised to help him. Daniel never stopped talking. The silence that had consumed him for so long had broken, and now words poured out of him like water from a spring. He had a gift with animals that bordered on magical. Horses that wouldn't let anyone else near them came to him willingly. Birds landed on his shoulder. Even the barn cats, notorious for their hostility, curled up in his lap. Emma became Rosa's shadow. She learned Spanish before she was 5,
She could cook a full meal before she was 6. She had her mother's determination and her new father's quiet strength. And then, one spring morning, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She told Jake at breakfast, just set down a cup of coffee and said, "I'm going to have a baby." Jake dropped his fork. It clattered against the plate. "What?" "A baby. Our baby," she smiled. "Are you going to say something?" He stood up so fast his chair fell over, crossed the room in 2 strides, pulled her into his arms.
"A baby," he breathed. "Our baby." "That's what I said." He pulled back. His face was wet with tears. "I never thought—" His voice broke. "After Martha, after losing everything, I never thought I'd—" "Neither did I." Sarah touched his face. "But here we are. Here we are." He kissed her, long and deep and full of promise. Behind them, Rosa cleared her throat. "If you two are done making spectacles of yourselves, breakfast is getting cold." They laughed, sat back down, finished their meal. But under the table, their hands stayed linked. The baby came in winter, a boy, strong and healthy. He had Jake's eyes and Sarah's stubborn chin. They named him John, after the man who had started Sarah on this journey, the man who had loved her first. "It's right," Jake said, holding his son for the first time. He should carry that name. "You don't mind?" "Mind?" Jake looked at her. "Sarah, John McAllister gave you to me. Gave me those children. Gave me this life." He kissed the baby's forehead. "This is the least I can do to honor him." Sarah leaned against her husband's shoulder, watching their son sleep. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For everything. For stopping that wagon. For asking me what I could do. For believing in me when no one else would." "You made it easy." "No," she shook her head. "I made it hard. I pushed you away. I doubted you. I almost ran a dozen times. But you didn't." "No, I didn't." She looked up at him. "Because of you." They sat there in the quiet of the nursery, watching their son breathe, and Sarah thought about how far she'd come. A year ago, she'd been standing on a dusty road with nothing but a suitcase and 3 hungry children. No money, no hope, no future. Now she had a husband who loved her, children who were thriving, a home that felt like a fortress, a life that felt like a miracle. And it had all started with one question. What can you do? Summer came around again. Sarah stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Little John was on her hip, gurgling happily. The other children were already at work. Thomas with the horses, Daniel in the barn, Emma helping Rosa in the kitchen. Jake came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing." She leaned back against him. "How different things are now." "Good different?" "The best different." He kissed her neck. "I got a letter from Mitchell yesterday." "What did it say?" "William's trial is over. He got 15 years. Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing. "How do you feel?" Jake asked. "Relieved, I think. Maybe a little sad." "Sad?" He was John's brother. He could have been family. Instead, he chose to be an enemy. She shook her head. "What a waste." "You're a better person than me. I don't feel sad at all." "Liar." He laughed. Maybe a little. They stood there in silence, watching the ranch come to life around them. Then Sarah said something she'd been thinking about for weeks. "I want to expand the house." Jake pulled back. "Expand? Rosa needs her own room. The boys are getting too big to share, and—" she paused. I might want more children. More? 1 or 2, maybe 3? She turned to face him. What do you think? Jake's face broke into a grin. I think you're trying to build an army. Maybe I am. This ranch needs hands. It certainly does. He pulled her close. Start planning. I'll start building. Now? Now. Tomorrow. Every day for the rest of our lives. He kissed her forehead. Whatever you need, Sarah. Whatever you want. I'll make it happen. She believed him, because Jake Thornton had never broken a promise to her. Not once. 2 years later, the house had doubled in size. The ranch had tripled in acreage. The family had grown by 2 more children, a girl named Clara and another boy named James. Sarah Thornton stood at the window of her bedroom, watching her children play in the yard below. Thomas was teaching the younger ones to ride. Daniel was somewhere in the barn, probably talking to the horses. Emma was chasing Clara through the grass, while James toddled after them on unsteady legs. Jake came up beside her. His hair was grayer now, his face more lined, but his eyes were the same, steady, kind, full of love. Quite a brood, he said. Our brood. Yours. I just help. You do more than help. She took his hand. You gave them a father. You gave me a partner. You gave all of us a home. You gave me something too. What? A reason to live. His voice was quiet, serious. After Martha and little Rose died, I was just going through the motions, working the land because it needed working, eating because the body needed food. But I wasn't alive, not really. Not until you. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Jake, you saved me, Sarah. You and those children. You brought this ranch back to life. You brought me back to life. He squeezed her hand. I will never be able to repay that. You don't have to repay it. Just keep loving me. Forever. Promise? Promise. They stood there at the window, hand in hand, watching their children laugh and play. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. The wind moved through the grass like a whisper. And Sarah Thornton, who had once begged for work on a dusty street with nothing but her children and her pride, knew that she had found something more valuable than gold or land or any earthly treasure. She had found love. Real love. The kind that doesn't fade or falter or run when things get hard. She had found family. Not just blood, but chosen. Bound together by struggle and sacrifice and 1,000 small acts of kindness. She had found home. Not just a building, but a feeling. A place where she belonged. Where she was wanted. Where she mattered. And it had all started with one man, one wagon, one question. What can you do? The answer, it turned out, was everything. She could work harder than anyone expected. She could love deeper than she ever thought possible. She could fight when fighting was needed, and forgive when forgiveness was called for. She could raise children who were kind and strong and brave. She could stand beside a good man and build something that would last for generations. She could do everything. And she did. The years rolled on. Children grew, grandchildren came. The ranch expanded until it was the largest in 3 counties. Jake's hair turned white. Sarah's face lined with age. But their love never dimmed, never wavered, never stopped. And when people asked how they did it, how they built such a life from such humble beginnings, they always told the same story. The story of a widow on a dusty road, a rancher with a broken heart, and the single question that changed everything. What can you do? Because in the end, that's all that matters. Not where you come from, not what you've lost, Not how many times you've been knocked down. Just what you can do. What you're willing to do. What you'll fight for and sacrifice for and never, ever give up on. Sarah Thornton knew that now. Knew it in her bones. And every morning, when she woke up beside the man she loved, in the home they'd built together, surrounded by the family they'd created, she whispered a silent prayer of thanks. For the wagon that stopped, for the question that was asked, for the life that was waiting, just around the bend, for anyone brave enough to reach for it. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. Because the greatest stories don't end with happily ever after. They continue, generation after generation, passed down from parents to children to grandchildren, growing richer with each telling. And Sarah Thornton's story, the story of the woman no one would hire until a rancher asked one question, became legend. They told it in saloons and churches, around campfires and dinner tables, in schoolrooms and bunkhouses. The story of how one question changed everything. The story of how love won. The story that proved, once and for all, that no matter how dark the night, dawn always comes. And it was true, every word.